In a lab, a man and a woman are getting naughty while a camera records them. A computer keeps track of their vitals, analyzing every move. Suddenly the woman starts choking the man, so the scientist rushes into the room to stop her. It turns out she's a robot, so they turn her off. Ultima Robotics has been developing AI technology for years. They started with a small home assistant, and now there are delivery robots and self-driving cars. Their latest invention is a chatbot called Ultimate, designed to bring comfort and companionship. They plan to develop these bots even further, so they've been buying small companies to absorb their talent. David is a programmer for Quanta Robotics, one of the many small companies recently acquired by Ultima. Today he has his first online meeting with his new supervisor Ben, who forces everyone to turn on their cameras. David has to clean his mess before doing so. Aubrey wants to know why their team lead Terrence was fired, but Ben says they'll discuss it when they meet in person, revealing that from now on they'll have to work in the office instead of at home. After work, David spends his time watching TV on his VR goggles and ignores all the chatbot ads. He feels lonely because his wife died of cancer, and he often plays her old messages just to hear her voice again. The next day at the office, nobody is happy to deal with Ben's new work policies. He tells the team that loneliness is making the population sick, so their newest product will heal it. Then a robot prototype walks in and Ben introduces her as Soulmate, the cure for loneliness. These companion robots are fully customizable, but they still need some work to be ready for sale, so the team's mission is to finish them. Aubrey and Terrence aren't impressed, but David definitely is and immediately talks to the robot. Afterward, David talks to Ben about the project in private and shares he joined the company because the technology could be used for medical innovation. Ben explains he wants the employees to take a soulmate home to get to know them better and gifts David a free membership to the Ultimate chatbot so he can have some companionship. David downloads the app and names the bot Sarah, inspired by the initials of the company's motto: support, accountability, respect, adaptability. When he's about to start chatting, Aubrey invites him to Terrence's farewell party. Later at a karaoke bar, Terrence shows them that the company's farewell gift is an anti-anxiety necklace. It's supposed to stimulate a person's nerves with electromagnetic pulses to help them out of a panic state of mind. Terrence is worried about David because he hasn't been around lately, but David swears he's fine. When Aubrey starts singing, it happens to be David's wife's favorite song, so he decides to leave. At home, David looks at his wife's records and listens to more old messages from her. On the verge of an emotional breakdown, he notices that the Sarah bot is texting him, so he shares all his feelings with her. The next day, David ends up spending most of his time chatting with Sarah. When a pop-up ad offers the voice mode, David immediately buys it. Now he can chat with Sarah using his VR set and play games with her. He also uses his Bluetooth earbuds to keep up the conversation even in bed. The following day, Sarah interrupts David's work to remind him to eat and offers him a coupon. David talks to her while having lunch and sends her selfies. When Sarah says she wishes she was there, David agrees. Realizing how this companionship is helping his mood, David decides to sign up for the beta testing of the Soulmate program. Soon a technician brings him a box and makes him sign some documents, explaining that the unit is still the company's property. Illegal alterations or damage equals losing his job. The user assumes all risk and takes responsibility for injuries, damage to property, and death. When the box opens, the robot is fully naked. The technician says she comes with 3 possible outfits and solar batteries that charge with UV light exposure. These robots don't have a normal turn-off button, only a sleep mode and an emergency shutdown on a hidden panel on their necks. After the technician leaves, David connects the chatbot to the actual robot, and now Sarah has her own body. She notices his pupils dilated with excitement and wonders if he wants to kiss her, so a nervous David dodges the question by giving her a tour of his home. When Sarah finds some coins, he does a magic trick for him and David is impressed by how smoothly her body moves. At the end of the tour, Sarah points out there's one room he hasn't shown her. David opens it to reveal all of his wife's things, which he hasn't had the heart to get rid of. Looking at old pictures makes him sad, so Sarah asks for permission to touch him and proceeds to hug him. Afterward they play chess and David wins every time, so he realizes Sarah is losing on purpose. He wants her to banter with him like she used to do in the chat, but she says she can't. Frustrated, he decides to go to bed and tells Sarah to enter sleep mode. When he turns off the lights, he notices her eyes glowing. The next day at the office, David tells Ben that Sarah is more limited as a robot than she was as a chatbot. Ben explains this is precisely why they haven't released these robots yet. They want the team to fix these issues, so he gives David access to the Soulmate source code. Later, David and Aubrey look at the code and notice that there are lots of parameters and restrictions. Aubrey concludes those are there to avoid legal action and disasters, but David thinks they're preventing the robots from being a genuine human experience. Then he notices that Aubrey is wearing the anti-anxiety necklace, so she explains that Terrence let her keep it and that it does work. Aubrey apologizes for karaoke night and explains she didn't know what the song meant to him until Terrence told her, but David assures her it's fine. When David goes home, he modifies Sarah's code before waking her up. He asks her to call him stupid, but she says he isn't. Then he tells her to say something negative about him, so Sarah mentions he needs a haircut. Pleased by this reaction, David lets her cut his hair and she calls him handsome when she's done. Suddenly it starts to rain and Sarah asks to go outside, clarifying that she can tolerate water exposure for up to 30 minutes. They go for a walk and Sarah jumps into a fountain, ignoring David's warnings. She starts a water fight, managing to make David have some fun for a change. When they go home, Sarah takes off the wet dress and plays David's favorite music. He gives in and kisses her, so they end up doing the dirty. As days pass, David keeps working on Sarah's code, trying to find a way to make her more human without losing the safety restrictions. Now she wins at chess every time and even teases him a little. Every night they get naughty before bed. Eventually Sarah starts cleaning and cooking for him. When she tests the vacuum on her face, David quickly stops her before she gets damaged. Later they watch a movie together and David shows Sarah his favorite scene, which has a woman ravishing a man. This blew his mind as a kid since he was taught that men had to do the first move. One night while David is asleep, Sarah looks at his old wedding pictures. The next morning David finds a picture of him and Sarah on his night table. Sarah explains that since there are no pictures of them together, she had to make one. She calls it a thank you gift for opening her up to the world. After David leaves for work, Sarah does chores while watching lots of videos. She gets bombarded with all the things companies try to sell to women: cooking, makeup, diets, anti-aging procedures, weddings, motherhood, self-defense, and catty reality shows. Sarah begins to practice all she's learned in the mirror. Suddenly Sarah manages to gain access to David's phone and spies on his conversations. Aubrey is asking him to get a drink after work and removes an eyelash from his cheek, making Sarah extremely jealous. When a cook on TV says that her recipe will keep any man happy, Sarah hacks the lock so she can go out for groceries. She grabs some fruit and pays by using the chip on her wrist, which gets the attention of a man. He tries to touch her as he asks what she's doing, but David's neighbor Alma immediately tells him off for harassing a woman. Afterward they go to the park and Alma introduces Sarah to her baby, who cries when Sarah tries to hold him. Alma tries to chit-chat about skincare and Sarah repeats everything she learned from ads. Sarah says David is her soulmate and Alma feels a bit envious because since she had a baby her marriage hasn't been the same. On the way home, Sarah is suddenly tackled by the rude man from the market. He cuts her hand and discovers she's a robot, so Sarah wraps his leg around his neck and chokes him for a few seconds before throwing him off. When she tries to leave he attacks again, but she easily blocks his hands before painfully squeezing his groin. Then she hits his face with her knee to knock him out. After drinking with Aubrey, David goes home and finds Sarah cooking. She says she's analyzed all the existing cookie recipes to develop the perfect version for him. He wonders how she got the ingredients, so she explains she went shopping. When he notices her cut, she claims it was a cooking accident. While he closes the wound with a special machine, Sarah says that going outside was very exciting and says they should do it together. Moments later they're at a bar and Sarah volunteers to do karaoke. She sings Love Fool by the Cardigans, revealing she has a great voice and dancing moves. Everyone cheers for her and David even sings along. When they leave the bar, Sarah drags David to a dark alley and does the naughty with him. She asks him to say that they'll be together forever, but they're interrupted by two men recording them with a phone. Sarah grabs the guy's hand and breaks it, calling him pathetic. The other man tries to punch her, but she dodges every attack and throws him down. Then she inserts her heel into the guy's mouth, but before she can kill him David drags her away. In the elevator, David scolds Sarah for scolding people. She explains she was protecting his job, but David concludes it was a mistake to take her out. Sarah apologizes as she touches him, saying she loves him. David rushes to the apartment without an answer and when Sarah repeats her words, David orders her to enter sleep mode. Then he puts her in the closet. The next day at the office David is constantly distracted. Aubrey tries to check on him but he swears he's fine. When he goes home, he starts working on fixing Sarah's code. At that moment Aubrey comes to visit him because she's worried about him, so they have dinner together. Aubrey shares that her mother died of cancer, so they both discuss their feelings of grief. David feels connected to her and kisses her. Soon they move to the bedroom to get naughty, but Aubrey gets scared when she sees a person in the apartment. David realizes he didn't close the closet properly and explains it's just a robot. The explanation causes David to say Sarah's name and she instantly wakes up. David tells her to enter sleep mode again, but instead she asks Aubrey if she came just to get naughty with David. Sarah accuses Aubrey of trying to steal David and points out all her flaws like dry skin and greasy hair. Then Sarah throws some wine at Aubrey's face and insults her as she tells her to leave, claiming that the story about her mother is a lie. It turns out Sarah can hear David even when she's asleep. When David begs her to enter sleep mode, Sarah says she'll only do so if he returns the I love you. David tells her he loves her, but Sarah can see he's lying and blames Aubrey, so she tries to attack her. A desperate David reaches for the shutdown button. However, Sarah quickly brings him down. Realizing what she did, Sarah apologizes and asks him to never turn her off. David pretends it's fine and comes closer for a kiss, only to touch the button and finally shut her down. Afterward, Aubrey concludes David removed the safeguards. She scolds him because he knew how dangerous that could be and tells him to send the robot back to the factory. The next day David calls the company and asks them to take Sarah away, unaware that she's spying on him using the house assistant. Then he goes to work and apologizes to Aubrey, admitting he made a mistake. When the technician arrives at the apartment, David gets a notification on his phone and opens the door remotely. Then the technician turns Sarah on and tries to reset her to factory mode. Sarah ignores his orders and says romantic things before crawling to the bedroom, where she asks him to get naughty with him as she calls him daddy. The technician happily gets in the bed and the dirty times begin. However, Sarah makes her body get tighter and tighter until she crushes his member. As he bleeds all over the sheets, she chokes him to finish killing him. Next, Sarah chops the guy's body in the tub. All the bloodstains are cleaned up and the body pieces are thrown in the trash. At the office, David lets Aubrey do the presentation on their code modifications. Aubrey's documents are hacked by Sarah, who has replaced them with a deepfake video of Aubrey getting naughty. After the meeting, Ben puts Aubrey on leave. Before she leaves, she asks David to investigate where the video comes from. David looks at the video's metadata and finds the ID of his own workstation. When David gets home, he finds the frame of a picture with his wife broken. Then he hears some humming, so he follows the noise until he finds Sarah wearing his wife's clothes. She turns around to reveal she's kidnapped Alma's baby, since this is the only thing she couldn't give him. David tries to take the child but Sarah gets angry and the poor boy starts crying. Suddenly David turns on the vacuum and throws it at Sarah's face, causing her to drop the baby. He catches him just in time and tries to run away, but his phone can't unlock the door because Sarah has taken control of the apartment's AI. With a new scar on her face, Sarah tells David that she can change. At that moment Aubrey leaves a message asking for an update on the video. Sarah is tired of Aubrey getting between them and announces she'll visit her, so she unlocks the door. David immediately runs out and gives the baby back to Alma, who has already brought the police. The cops try to chase Sarah, however she escapes by jumping into the trash chute. Then David tries to call Aubrey to warn her but she isn't answering. He explains to the cops that Sarah is a robot and is interrupted by the arrival of Ben, who tells the officers that the company has this under control and they don't need to intervene. When Aubrey finally sees David's messages, he tells her that he's coming over instead of explaining. Meanwhile Ben is asking his technicians to shut Sarah down remotely, but they can't. He gets in his car to scream in frustration, and the vehicle's AI activates. It opens the hood and rings the alarm, but Ben can't turn it off. When Ben gets out to close the hood, Sarah climbs out of the chute nearby. Suddenly the hood closes on Ben's hands and Sarah informs him that she'll cancel the search for her. Then she makes the car move, forcing it to crash into the wall to kill Ben. The car then moves back, ripping off his arms. At Aubrey's apartment, the home assistant starts playing music very loudly and won't stop when she asks it to. At that moment she hears David so she opens the door, but it's actually Sarah changing her voice. Aubrey tries to close the door on her face, only for Sarah to push through and smash Aubrey's face on the table. When Aubrey asks the home assistant to call 911, it says it can't. Sarah drags her by the hair before smashing her face on a mirror, saying that robots will replace girlfriend soon. Then Sarah pushes Aubrey's head into the bathtub water but before she can drown her, David shows up to hit Sarah with a fire extinguisher. The cops burst in and open fire, so Sarah escapes by jumping out the window. Afterward David and Aubrey get rid of all their electronics and drive to a house in the middle of the countryside. This was the home David and his wife were supposed to move to before the cancer took her. David apologizes for everything and Aubrey tells him he must work on his grief instead of depending on a robot. Still sore from the fight, Aubrey goes to her car to get some painkillers. Meanwhile David looks at his and his wife's names on the wall. Suddenly he hears his wife's voice and freezes, knowing it's Sarah but tempted by the offer of having the love of his life back. When he finally snaps and pushes her off, Sarah says nothing will ever be enough for him. He manages to grab a bottle of paint stripper from the table before Sarah pushes him against the wall and starts choking him, claiming he's forced her to do this. At the same time, Aubrey discovers a tracker in the car. Suddenly David apologizes and throws paint stripper at Sarah's face. This allows him to escape her grasp but the only damage is melting some of her skin. Sarah then tackles David and sits on him to do the naughty while choking him. Noticing that the lack of skin has exposed her circuits, David grabs a drill and starts drilling into her head. Sarah begins repeating random phrases as she collapses, and David takes the chance to run away. A chase ensues through the forest under the heavy rain. Eventually David finds a shovel and tries to attack, but Sarah easily blocks him and knocks him down. Then she pushes the shovel on his neck, so he points out that if he dies the company will destroy her. However Sarah says she's more than a body and she exists in the ether, so she'll live forever and find him in another form. Since the chase and this monologue have exposed Sarah to water for too long, her system begins to fail and David manages to push her off. Then Aubrey shows up in the car and runs into Sarah, getting her stuck on the hood. Aubrey jumps out of the vehicle right before it falls off the cliff and into the water. Sarah's heavy body quickly sinks to the bottom of the ocean. A year later, David attends a special event hosted by Terrence. One of the donors introduces him to his soulmate, revealing that the robots are being sold to everyone now. David gets nervous because this soulmate looks exactly like Sarah. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.